New ideas and projects are an essential part of life that keeps it interesting. They drive us to change and they help us to become who we were born to be. They are also where we fall down. We can often learn important lessons in the act of failing in these projects, but there is the issue that we can waste a lot of time and could instead be learning much faster if we had a better practice of introspection. Now, Coco Chanel said that I invented my life by taking for granted that everything that I did not like would have an opposite which I would like. And so I really want people to stop putting themselves through the stress and pain of striving to finish things that aren't right for them when they could be starting things that are right for them. For example, you can start many books, but you really shouldn't finish them all. If a book becomes a really unrewarding challenge, it's just better to start a new one that excites you to read and perhaps read that new one twice if it's a good one. And it's the same with ideas and projects. You should keep moving, you should have lots of ideas, and it's great to test them out, but it's essential to abandon the ones that hold you back. A good idea from years ago actually just becomes baggage that gets in the way of your new ideas. Hello and welcome to the Growth Mindset Podcast with me, your host, Sam Webster Harris, where we explore the psychology of self-improvement. And today we're talking about how to get things done that you want to do and do more of these things, because this is something that people get wrong all the time. And if you learn nothing else from this episode, I want you to really learn the concept that you should start more of the things that you finish. Now, this might sound dumb, but what's really dumb is to hold ourselves to the productivity guru concept that we can always work harder or engineer our routine a little bit better or make our mindset even more resilient so that we can just finish anything, because some things we should not finish. Now, an action is basically a function of our motivation and our ability to do it. And if our ability or our motivation is lacking, it's much less hard to make the action happen. And so, clearly, the optimal strategy here to get more action out of you is to lean into your strengths, your abilities, and into your interests, your motivations, doing the things that you're kind of good at doing and have interest in finishing doing. So if you list the things that when you start doing them, you subsequently finish them, that's going to give you a good idea of stuff that you like doing to the completion. And so look at the list of the things that you actually finish and remove the ones that you don't enjoy and they're just things like accounting that you get done because you just have to do it. Try and identify the things that create value and try and just spend more time doing the things that you do well already, because these are the things that you enjoy and that motivate you and you're good at them and also create value. Honestly, this is just such a huge life hack that people completely ignore so much of the time. Often the answer is just right in front of us. So I would really give this idea some space to dwell on and try and have this conversation with yourself and write that list or talk to someone else about the things that you do well and actually do. Because in the age of everyone diagnosing themselves with ADHD and getting distracted, the things that you actually finish are probably a really good indicator of the things that you value and are good at. This exercise actually led to me doing more of the podcast because it's always been a bit of a side project for me for over 6 years. And yet I have always finished the episodes. I have always released them. And I was looking at them being I'm really reliable at being a podcaster. And I was trying to do a lot more videos for YouTube and coming up with other ideas. And I just wasn't finishing any of them. And it's okay, so maybe I should do more of the thing that I actually do rather than wasting a half a year not doing any of this thing that I think I want to do, but apparently I don't. So here I am making more podcasts. And genuinely, as far as this episode is concerned, I do feel like I could finish the episode right here and you would be like, this is a take home. This is an answer for so many people's problems. But variety is the spice of life. And I have some alternative ideas for the rest of the episode to help you finishing stuff. Sadly, not everything is always going to be easy, but sometimes things do need to get done. We will have new ideas that are genuinely important for us to finish. So here's some of my advice on filtering these ideas and making them projects that you will actually complete. Second stage is to identify the blockers that you have and working out how to cure those blocks. We will often tie ourselves to a much harder way of doing something than we actually need to. And we can really learn a lot by trying to train a habit of making things easier for ourselves, because striving to be perfect and not finishing things means that we aren't actually creating anything. We're just messing around. Now, if you want to be a creator or a business person, you have to actually finish the thing. Like 99% done doesn't mean done. And to be a creator, you have to spend time doing things that you finish. So, for example, with my writing, I'll have an idealized version of perfection in my head. And I really like writing long, very long thought pieces that are too long. There will be several tangents, and I'll just unpack everything on a grand meta theory of life, the universe, and everything that isn't needed. And by trying to cover every single edge case that people might have as a thought to my initial statement, I'll end up getting lost in worries where people might think my logic is flawed. And this leads to me just re-editing a million times with this super long document, which I end up hating doing and putting off and just not really finishing any of my writing. Trying to write something like that is just really unhelpful. And actually my goal is to just come up with like a shorter idea and express it clearly. And so I should really abandon the idea of perfection in my head of like having all the edge cases and really go for something much smaller and easier to write, and just give myself a plan for 5 minutes at the start of my writing exercise of like, these are the points that I want to cover and are important to be said, and like stick to the easier version. And when I have a concise word and time limit to express a reduced version of what's going on in my head, it really helps me think and clarify and make better writing, which is ironically probably more perfect than the thing that I used to write. Now, that requires a bit of time making some difficult decisions and prioritizing, but then the work becomes much easier to finish. So I do a bit more of the hard work up front to make the actual workload much easier. What's also cool is that actually pushes me to be more creative. I'll invent better analogies that will cover more ideas in one story rather than coming up with like analogies for everything. And an analogy for this might be coding, because in coding, you can literally solve any problem with a bunch of if statements and for loops. This can make some very, very long and messy code. When you look at a good coder, they'll package all of this interesting logic into just concise and readable functions that will make the code much cleaner and easier to read and easier to change the performance of without it all being tied together in knots. Because each function should deliver a consistent output with a degree of edge cases considered, but the more edge cases that get accounted for, the more complex the function and subfunctions become, and the more tied in knots the whole program becomes. And with writing, again, you could explain every single thing you want thought by thought, but ultimately you just have a few important outputs that you want the reader to understand. And so using stories and analogies are like functions in code to clean up the mess of thoughts in your head. But anyway, the lesson here is to try and remove non-essential blockers in whatever routine or habit that you have that you're trying to complete for any work project or creative project. And think about how you can just make it easier, make it simpler, make it faster, make it less expensive, more enjoyable, whatever the blockers are. Think for a little bit analytically about how you can remove them so that you're more likely to finish them. And trust me, just spending 5 minutes with a journal and thinking about your tasks and how you can make them easier can really save you hours. Or just talking to a friend or a work colleague about like the tasks that you have at hand. And so much of what we do probably isn't necessary. Number 3, addressing the dangerous blockers that we just can't beat or that we won't ever beat. Now, there are a lot of tasks that do have elements that we might really enjoy, but if there is an element that is crucial to the task that we don't enjoy and that we aren't going to finish, then we could be in trouble because we'll just never do the overall big task. And so when we can't find a way to make the part of the task that we don't enjoy easier or more enjoyable, we do need to just be realistic with ourselves. We need to review the full processes of whatever this creative task is to create a finished piece of work and look at the parts that we don't like and work out if we will ever finish them. Because if we're not going to finish it, there's no point in starting the task and just messing around. And the do it, delegate it, or delete framework for any task is great because accounting is boring, but I do have to do it. And if I really struggled, I could delegate it instead. I can't delete it because it's just an important part of being a human with taxes. But now marketing for my podcast, that's boring and I don't want to do it. And I haven't really felt like paying someone to do it. And it isn't essential. Like my podcast still grows despite me not really bothering to do much marketing for it. Less fast than it could do, but I can carry on with ignoring doing marketing for my podcast week to week. That said, I can also put in my diary some time to work out how to make it more fun. And so this year I have actually spent more time doing things on the podcast. And so finally this year, after 6 years of running the podcast, I have started spending more time doing marketing. I have started doing a video podcast. If you wanted to go onto YouTube, there are sometimes some shorts coming out, and like it is starting to grow and become a thing. And this is nice. But the point is, I didn't let marketing get in the way of my podcast and ruin the energy to run my whole podcast. So I was still running a podcast for 6 years without pissing myself off with marketing. And that was really sensible because I could just delete the task and do the important part, which was making the episodes each week. That meant the whole thing was still fun, the whole thing was still successful, and didn't tie myself to being bored or annoyed every week. For another analogy, there are some things that we start as a project that will have some bits that we don't like, that we can't delete or we can't delegate and we can't ignore. So, for example, a lot of people start the ketogenic diet, which is where your body will start burning fat instead of carbs. And in this diet, you'll eat mostly fat, some protein, and no carbs at all. And some people really like this because it has the concept that fat is very healthy. And you can also lose weight by eating lots of fat. So they'll immediately start to eat more fat, but they won't actually do the really, really, really important part of not eating any carbs at all. And so they're basically never going into ketosis where they're just burning fat, but they are increasing the amount of calories that they eat by eating a lot more fat and still eating some carbs and protein. And so they just get even more overweight. Just because if a project sounds fun, but if it has some bits that you aren't going to do, you're going to fail the project. So you're going to fail the project of being in ketosis if you don't actually do all the essential parts of it and you just like some of it. And this is why it's so important to look at whatever blockers there might be in any project that you undertake and if you're really going to complete them or not. Because otherwise you shouldn't start the project at all. Because like the ketogenic diet, if you don't do it properly, it's actually just going to damage you and make things worse. And for an example like that, most people are just never going to follow a diet that extreme for that long and should really look at a different way to become healthy in the long term. And with a growth mindset, yes, you can potentially do anything, but you can't do everything. And you certainly can't do anything straight away, instantly, very well. So it's better to focus on your strengths and not try to battle every blocker that comes up and accept some of the blockers that are in life and not start the things that are going to be too difficult because they'll actually just make your life worse. So most importantly, the lesson here is to not start things that would be bad if you start it but don't complete it properly. So I would actually update the framework of do it, delegate it, delete it to do it, delegate it, delete it, or don't even start it, because some things shouldn't be started. And now, number 4 on the how to get more things done, saying no to more things, because there are always more projects and more ideas and more things to do. The world is increasingly distracting and the pulls on your time are only getting worse. The best way to get things done is to not have many things to do. Sure, you might be offered some paid work or someone you like might ask you to do a task for them, but all these little things end up defining our routines and our life. If the work that you get asked to do doesn't align with you, it can drain you and make it hard to do the things that you did want to do. It's harder to find that motivation to go and start the things that you wanted to do when you're too tired and too busy and too distracted by like all these different things going on. Again, action is motivation times ability. So if you start losing a motivation because you're worn out, you're less likely to do it. If you start losing ability because you don't have the actual time to do it, again, you're not going to do it. So when you become so tired from other work that you don't enjoy, you won't have the motivation or ability to do the things that you should be doing. If you are genuinely struggling to finish ideas that you are passionate about, it's very often because you're just too busy and blocked by the things that you're not so bothered about and finding it hard to manage all the different demands on your time. And that's okay. You just need to have a framework of things to say no to and make sure you have enough money to put food on the table and do some things that you enjoy. Otherwise, live the life doing work that you like as opposed to wasting it working on things you don't enjoy. You have to value your time because time is limited. Naval Ravikant decided to come up with a framework to help take himself seriously, where he put a hypothetical valuation of his time as $1,000 an hour, because that made him take himself seriously. And if you look at your goals and ask yourself if what you're spending your time on day to day is pushing you in that direction of your bigger goals, then are you truly getting the value out of yourself that you are actually worth, or are you wasting your potential doing all these little different things, this confetti of time going everywhere into different projects that aren't making much value? And if you just worked on like few bigger things, could that be worth so much more to you? Probably. It is easy to just keep doing the things that you do because that's what we've always done. But we do need to learn to ask ourselves when things are actually that worthwhile or if they're stopping us from achieving something better. Now, my first piece of advice was do more of what you finish. But there are, of course, scenarios when that's wrong to do because sometimes you'll finish things that you just find easy but aren't that helpful to you. And perhaps they're just like smaller to do or easy to fit in, but aren't actually that useful. Social media, something most people find easy to do, but maybe isn't that useful for them. Or even for me with my podcast, yes, I was finishing things, but some of the things that I was finishing weren't things that were so important to me. So I've actually really looked into how I run the podcast, what kind of content I make, and it took a lot more ownership of like what I wanted the podcast to be and to become, rather than just doing some of the things that were easy, but actually were getting away from the point of the podcast. To summarize that point, make sure you're not doing too many things, look at what you are doing and cut out some time and basically work on less stuff. And you'll find yourself completing a lot more things because if you only give yourself one task to do today, and if it's important and nothing else matters, you will do that task. But when you have like 5 different things going on, you'll probably just do 2 of the lower down ones and somehow the important things just don't get done. Now, number 5, this one might be my favorite. Don't hold on to your brilliant ideas. When we get an amazing idea, we do feel like they just need to be done properly, perfectly. They're just so good that you can't possibly take the chance of risking them not being done as well as they could be. But that does lead us to procrastinate and not actually do them because we want to do them so properly. And what we need to realize is that all of our good ideas are just stepping stones to our future potential. Behind any of our ideas lie more good ideas. And we can't even imagine how good those ideas might be yet because we've still got our current ideas in the front of us. Now, this is another angle looking at the problem of perfection, but perfection absolutely sucks, which is why this is such a good framework. And perfection is even more of a blocker in areas that might be new to you, especially if you have a big idea in that area. So let's say like a young founder scared to even share their idea because they can't risk it going wrong. Or a new writer who's overthinking their new book. It's like, you just have to start the project and like put it out there, learn from the mistakes and do more things. And when I look at my own idea process, I just have so many ideas for so many different things with so many different elements to them, like a comedy sketch one day, or like a product feature, a social media post, or like making a new song. And creating any of those ideas in their perfect state would probably require learning a lot of new skills, will take a lot of time to do them that I don't have. And so it's easy to put all of these ideas into the I'll get round to them one day pile and not start any of them, because I of course want to be able to do them complete justice, because of this brilliant thing in my mind should be done brilliantly. And when I do that, I'll develop this stupid sense that that is the best song or the best comedy sketch idea that I'll have. And I become precious about it, when in fact, it's the opposite. It stops me from working on new ideas in that area, and I'll lose my creativity for it. And so these good ideas become creative baggage when they're in the way. And what we need to realize is that creativity is regenerative. The more we use our creativity, the more we'll get rewarded with it feeling fun, and we'll get feedback from what we've done, and we'll actually learn from like the world when we put our ideas into it. So when we get over the hurdle of just starting our ideas, we learn more skills and have even better ideas. The thing that you might think of now that feels like it's perfect might only be 20% of the ultimate potential of your talent. But if you stop and wait until you can do that thing properly, you might never go anywhere at all. We really need to feel comfortable failing and just putting ideas out there in their minimal format. So anyone in entrepreneurship should have heard the idea of minimal viable product. And that is the most basic version of your business idea. Instead of a full-blown app with all the different features, it's like, can you create a WhatsApp group where you solve this problem for people, whether it's like directing their mail or giving them advice on something? Like, is there a smaller way that you can do it quickly and now, as opposed to spending lots of money and like lots of time building it to then find that like actually it doesn't quite solve the problem? And what you need to do is just release any of your ideas as quickly as possible to get feedback from real people and learn from them. And this can lead to a business that's wildly different to your first idea, but actually works, whereas your first idea usually isn't something that will actually work. Whereas most people's first business idea isn't something that actually works in reality, like Twitter with a podcasting app when it first started. So what's important is to just develop momentum, and with that, we can then develop the skills to have better ideas. And remember that your brilliant idea is just a stepping stone, so don't let it become a blocker. You need to cast those stones and just use them for what they are. If you look at Mr. Beast, for example, he was YouTubing for years and years and years and just got into the practice of having ideas and learning what people want. And he just slowly iterated and made his ideas better and better, which helped him grow. And it was only recently where he had his so far best idea, which was the Squid Game video that was just like absolutely huge. And he couldn't even have conceived of an idea like that like 10 years ago when he first started, when he just didn't even comprehend the idea of having like a big budget. So you have to start your ideas and just learn as you put things out there. And that's going to unblock ideas that you just didn't even imagine that you could have had without just getting into the process of putting things out there. And I love the quote that to become an expert at something, you have to be comfortable being a terrible amateur, because it's just so true. And so ultimately, when it comes to tasks, when it comes to projects, when it comes to creating things, value is made by finishing them. Value is made by people that create stuff, not by consumers. So anything that you can regularly and reliably create will make value as long as you finish it. If you write 3,000 words of a book that you don't publish, it could take half a year of your life. At the end of it, you've still published 0 books. Whereas better to write 30 blogs of 1,000 words and publish all of them because you have 30 blogs out there. So don't fight an uphill battle pushing on doors that won't open. Double down on your strengths. Think of alternative ways to deal with your weaknesses, and the weaknesses that you can't fix, don't fix. Learn how to get around them. Don't finish what you start. Start what you finish. And now, finally, just a bunch of questions that I would really ask you to ask yourself. So firstly, which tasks do I reliably finish? And of those tasks, could some of them be creating a lot more value if I just did more of them? Number 2, what are my unfinished projects? What are the specifics of the tasks in those projects that make it a project that I avoid finishing? How can I make it more likely that I will complete the difficult tasks in these unfinished projects? Could I make it smaller? Could I delegate it? Could I change the time that I do it? Could I do it with others? Or is there any way to just remove the difficult parts of this task entirely and just do the bits that I like and finish something useful? Number 3, do I start things which I know I won't finish, even though it might be damaging to start? If so, what's my goal in starting them in the first place? And is there a different way to achieve that goal instead? Such as that ketogenic diet one, just trying a different diet instead of doing the keto diet that most people never achieve. Number 4, how much time do I put into things that I don't enjoy and don't add value to my life? And once you work that out, how much time can I save by cutting things out? Is there a framework I can build to say no to things? And if I really do value my time, how can I prioritize better the things that I start so that I will definitely finish them? And then finally, what are all of the best ideas that I've had that I've never done? Can I let go of the idea of being perfect with them and enjoy making an easier version of them that actually gets out there? And that last one I think is so important, as I just said. Your good ideas are just stepping stones on the way to better ideas. So hopefully this whole episode on just finishing stuff has been helpful for you, and I'd love to hear any of your ideas in the feedback. If this helped you, please share it with someone you think would like it, and possibly give me a good rating if you feel inspired to. And on that, life is to be enjoyed, and that starts with enjoying today. It's not a future thing to put off. So be kind to yourself, and whilst you're at it, be kind to someone else too.